Imelda Marcos is said to have owned 1,000 shoes. Some say much more, some say less. But no one denies that the wife of the Filipino dictator had more shoes than she could possibly ever wear. In 1986, when the people stormed the presidential palace, they found proof of opulence that symbolized all that was unjust in the lives they lived. In the shoes Imelda left behind, as the Marcoses fled the country. "36 years later, the youth of Sri Lanka lay on the ornate bed of their evicted president Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The presidential palace in Colombo had been taken over by the people. The common will once again declared supreme as another oppressor fled in the face of rising anger. The palaces and parliaments of the ruler, distanced from the plight of the masses, turned symbols of oppression and injustice. Their storming, fair outlet of people's ire. Like most recently in Nepal, before that in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, across the subcontinent, and across the world where there have been massive demonstrations. Hundreds of thousands of common citizens have come out to protest, to seek change, to demand justice. The adamant, the obdurate, the released energy of united rage, frothing with kinetic power, capable of sweeping away even the most entrenched. Ire is rising. It happened in Nepal, where Gen Z in their thousands hit the streets, and in just 2 days, the Prime Minister had to resign and the government had collapsed. It happened in Sri Lanka, when after weeks of rising rage, the Lankan youth stormed the presidential palace. Aragalaya, the struggle, swept Sri Lanka's powerful Rajapaksa family out of power and even out of the country. Something inconceivable before the movement burst forth in March 2022. 12-hour-long power cuts, fuel shortages, runaway inflation, medicine scarcity drove angry people to the streets. Sri Lankans from diverse ethnicities, religions, generations, and social classes united in demanding political change and accountability for economic crimes. Aragalaya mobilized hundreds of thousands of Sri Lankans to protest peacefully. It brought together all shades of Lankans, for the first time since the brutal civil war ended in 2009. The youth made up much of the largely non-violent struggle that was not only about unity, but also about political enlightenment. Leaderless and non-partisan, what began in Colombo spread its spirit nationally. Offshoots sprang up in Kandy and Galle, and worldwide protests appeared in cities across Australia, Europe, and the United States in support of friends and family back home. The will of the people overran government offices and the palace of the president. Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to flee Sri Lanka to escape the resolve of his people to enforce change. Two years later, Sheikh Hasina had to flee the ire of the youth of Bangladesh. They were at the gates of her palace, rattling the very padlocks that had kept them shackled, demanding an immediate end to her power. On 5th of August 2025, the Bangladesh army, till then protecting the Prime Minister, gave her an ultimatum. She had less than an hour to flee, after which the army would stand aside and let the people of Bangladesh in. That day, hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshi youth had defied curfew to bring about a regime change. Sheikh Hasina fled Dhaka on a chopper before crossing over to India on a Bangladesh Air Force aircraft. Yet Hasina had once been the darling of the masses, hailed for rescuing the country from military rule. But 15 years on, and her iron fist and intolerance to dissent meant the public wanted her gone. Protests had begun with students at university campuses, and then it had just kept growing. The more Hasina cracked down with force, more the people rose. Violence begot violence. Hasina's party members became targets, and there was a breakdown of law and order. Police stations got torched and people got fired upon, and still the people rose, till Hasina was gone. People rally against governments and people rally against injustice. In March 2025, hundreds of thousands of Turkish citizens protested the arrest of President Tayyip Erdogan's main political rival, Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. On Sunday, 15th of September, thousands upon thousands gathered at Ankara's vast Tendogan Square, protesting the year-long crackdown on CHP, the main opposition party in Turkey. 17 CHP mayors and hundreds of party members face alleged corruption and terrorism links. CHP leader Özgür Özel said the people had gathered to stand against the judicial coup being waged against the party.
This government does not want democracy. They know they cannot win the election if there is democracy. They don't want justice. They know if there is justice, they won't be able to cover up their crimes.
Block en tout, block everything, was the shout that reverberated across France as irate people gathered to obstruct daily life. France did not come to a standstill or grind to a halt on Wednesday, September 10th. But there were 596 public gatherings and 253 blockades, according to official sources. And about 200,000 demonstrators were out on French streets. 80,000 police were mobilized across France to keep protesters in check. Riot police fired tear gas and demonstrators set bins on fire. The Block Everything Day of Action was apolitical and had been a few months in the making. The movement, with no leader, had begun on messaging groups over the summer to plan protests against budget cuts and the government. It was a show of anger against President Emmanuel Macron and the political elite. It was anger against political elite that brought about a change of government in Nepal. Fed up with corruption and the unjust disparity in the life of a common Nepali youngster compared to the one from a politically elite family, Gen Z took matters into their own hand and forced a change.
Nobody will speak for your rights. You have to speak for your own rights. And we came here for our rights. But the Nepal government was corrupt, is corrupt. They are corrupt.
Corruption was at the core of the protests in Nepal, just as it was in Indonesia in August and September 2025. Demonstrations over a planned increase in allowances for members of the House of Representatives escalated into violent protests after a delivery driver was killed by security forces. Several people died, hundreds got injured, and public buildings burnt and looted after thousands of people took to the streets in anti-government protests across Indonesia. The protests continued as pink-clad female protesters from the Indonesian Women's Alliance waved broomsticks as they marched to parliament. They said the brooms symbolized their desire to sweep away the dirt of the state and police repression. Student-led protesters expanded their demands to include total reform of the Indonesian National Police and resignation of the Chief of Police. The Indonesian protesters have put their government on notice, and some of the perks for the lawmakers have already been rolled back. 5 ministers' heads have also rolled as they have lost their jobs.
Everyone who's going to speak today, they tried to break.
Protests by common people are not always against their own. Sometimes it is anger at the perceived outsider that roils the streets. More than 100,000 anti-immigration protesters marched through the streets of central London on 13th of September 2025. Under the banner of Unite the Kingdom, in one of the country's largest ever far-right demonstrations. Elon Musk addressed the protesters via video link, calling for a dissolution of the UK government and warning protesters that violence is coming and saying they need to fight back or die.
violence is coming to you, you either fight back or you die. You either fight back or you die.
Not always do people also come out on the streets in their hundreds of thousands for reasons that impact them personally. Humanity makes common people with conscience come out in solidarity with fellow humans elsewhere. On an August Sunday, between 100 to 300,000 people walked across the Sydney Harbour Bridge in Australia in solidarity with the people of Palestine. The Australians braved winter winds and the cold as they marched clutching umbrellas, signs and flags. The crowds chanted, "Shame, shame Israel, shame, shame USA." The final stage of the Vuelta a España was abandoned amidst chaotic and violent scenes. Pro-Palestine protesters swamped the finish line area and the presentation podium in central Madrid on 14th of September 2025. Thousands of protesters had been demonstrating against the Israeli-owned team since the iconic annual event began. The team earlier in the race had removed the team's name from its uniforms, but still the protesters. Spaniards in their thousands showed their displeasure. Seven of the last 11 days of racing were either cut short or interrupted. The route of the final stage was cut short by 5 kilometers. Police in riot gear had confronted protesters at different points along the route. The protesters threw barriers onto the roads and objects at police and were tear gassed in return. According to official reports, more than 100,000 people took part in the pro-Palestinian protests that interrupted the final stage. Even the Prime Minister of Spain extended his support to the will of the people of his country.
Veía antes por detrás alguna bandera palestina y sí quisiera decir varias cosas al respecto. La primera,
our respect and recognition is for the athletes and our admiration for the Spanish people who are mobilizing for just causes like Palestine.
Y vaya por delante nuestro reconocimiento y respeto absoluto a los deportistas.
People's ire do not march only on the streets. Anger against the oppressor also floats. In August and September 2025, boats of varied sizes set sail from ports around the world to converge and open up a humanitarian corridor to Gaza. Coordinated and organized by non-political groups and organizations from across 40 countries. The Global Sumud Flotilla is the largest collection of civilian boats ever assembled to break a nation-state enforced blockade. The small ships that make up the flotilla carry critical humanitarian supplies like food, medicine and baby formula for the besieged people of Gaza.
Free Palestine!
Viva, viva Palestina!
Our mission is peaceful, completely lawful, and grounded in the urgent need to deliver humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza, while also doing everything possible to ensure global attention is on Palestine.
In Arabic, Sumud stands for resilience. People's will is resilient. People's will is supreme. In the end, people will win. It has always been so. It will always be so.